Good evening, Americans, and welcome to The Ed Show, live from New York. Let's get to work.
It's not a sexy story.
Tonight, President Obama sounds off on the biggest issue of our time.
Climate change is one that is happening at such a broad scale.
Clearly, we've had changes in our climate.
I've heard some folks try to dodge the evidence by saying they're not scientists.
I'll let the scientists debate the sources and their opinion of that change.
You've heard of off the charts.
Later, Al Gore's dream takes flight.
This satellite was in storage for a decade and a half.
That's where the Deep Space Climate Observatory satellite mission, better known as Discover, comes in.
You all are used to this kind of routine down here. It's very exciting for me.
Plus, an Alabama judge speaks out against equality.
When people find they can create rights, there's no end to the power they've got.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. We start this evening with some brutally honest remarks coming from President Obama on climate change. In an interview with Vox, that would be VOX, President Obama said the media overstates the risk of terrorism compared to climate change.
Do you think the media sometimes overstates the sort of level of alarm people should have about terrorism and this kind of chaos as opposed to a longer-term problem of climate change and epidemic disease?
Absolutely. And, you know, I don't blame the media for that. You know, what's the famous saying about local newscasts, right? If it bleeds, it leads, right? You show crime stories and you show fires, because that's what folks watch. It's all about ratings. And climate change is one that is happening at such a broad scale and such a complex system that it's a hard story for, I think, the media to tell on a day-to-day basis.
President Obama thinks that the media clings to stories like terrorist attacks because it's easy to cover and it rates. Climate change is more complex. It's long-term and difficult for the press to get excited about it and to cover it. We've tried to do it on this program, cover climate change. We think it's important. Extensively, to the point where we have exhausted coverage of the Keystone XL pipeline. And we also think extreme weather events around the country are very important, and we think it's all connected to climate change. At this hour, New England is being slammed by its third major snowstorm in 3 weeks. The storm is expected to dump 2 feet of snow in parts of the region. Sound normal to you? It could bring the snow totals in some areas up to 80 inches, and we still got a lot of winter left. That means digging out at 6.5 feet of snow. Over the past 3 weeks, snowplows in Massachusetts have moved enough snow to fill Gillette Stadium 90 times. Well, the mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, says it's a record-setting winter.
These storms that we're getting is unprecedented. We've never seen this type of snow here in the city of Boston at any other time in the history of our city. And there's discussions that there could be more snow at the end of the week. Severe weather like this, what we're seeing in New England, is really becoming par for the course. There's little doubt among scientists severe weather and climate change are clearly connected. A new study from GeoRisks Research shows world natural catastrophes have been steadily increasing. In 1980, there were roughly 400 catastrophes. In 2014, it was close to 1,000. Easy math to do. Some of these events are happening right here. For instance, other extremes. California is experiencing its worst drought in over 1,200 years. San Francisco just saw its first January without rain, not a drop of rain, for 165 years. Last summer, we saw record wildfires in the state of Washington. Parts of Lake Erie turned into a toxic algae bloom during the warming temperatures. And of course, in January, NOAA announced 2014 was the warmest record on global records. I mean, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's one after another. These are record-breaking times when it comes to severe weather. Meanwhile, Republicans, what do? They deny science, and they say that man is not the problem when it comes to climate change. It's rather startling.
Last month, Senator Brian Schatz attached an amendment to the Keystone XL bill saying, quote, human activity significantly contributes to climate change. 49 Republicans voted against the amendment, including the new chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee.
Climate has always changed, and it always will. There's archaeological evidence of that. There's biblical evidence of that. There's historic evidence of that. It will always change. The hoax is that there are some people who are so arrogant to think that they are so powerful they can change climate. Man can't change climate.
Clearly, science means nothing to Senator Inhofe. A few days later, Senate Republicans approved the Keystone XL pipeline. It's just the latest step in their radical agenda to let oil companies run amok, do whatever they want. Some Republicans want to eliminate the Environmental Protection Agency. They don't know why. They just say they don't like regulations, as if they don't do anything good at all. They want to drill now off the East Coast, and the president is wrong on this to allow it to happen. And they want to drill in national parks. As we've documented on this show, there is no such thing as safe oil drilling or pipelines. I was down in the Gulf this weekend covering the aftermath of the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster almost 5 years later, and the Gulf is still a mess. If science-denying Republicans had their way, all our oceans and public lands would be at risk. They want to drill everywhere. Next week on The Ed Show, we're going to bring you a 5-part series on the Gulf. We'll tell you about the destroyed lives and businesses, the environmental impact, the health issues that people are dealing with, and just what is BP doing when it comes to financial restitution. Our series starts next Monday, The Gulf Today, 5 years after the spill. And tonight, let me introduce you to what is known down in the Gulf as a tar ball. This is oil. This was oil that was released from the oil spill 5 years ago. And then they put the chemical Corexic on it. And of course, the mass comes together. It drops to the bottom of the Gulf. And this tar ball was picked up in recent days by a shrimp boat in the Gulf. Now, this is what's happening. This isn't being reported anywhere. The bottom line is the Gulf is still a major story. Did you know that that $20 billion that they committed for restitution for all the people who were hurt in the Gulf? No. Only $4 billion has been paid out. Do you know that there's a tremendous amount of litigation that's taking place right now, and lives have been destroyed, careers have been lost, and there's a tremendous amount of strife in the Gulf right now. But if you see the commercials and you listen to the PR hacks out there, you think, oh, hell, the Gulf is on a roll. It is not. We will bring you the story next week here on The Ed Show. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question: do you think Republicans will ever admit humans cause climate change? Text A for yes, text B for no. For 67622, you can leave a comment at our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. For more on our discussion tonight, let me bring in Dr. Reese Halter, conservation biologist at the Muse School. Also, Tiernan Sittenfeld is with us tonight. She is the League of Conservation Voters. And also, Mike Papantonio, Ring of Fire radio host and America's Attorney. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, great to have you with us tonight. It's good to be back in New York. And Mike did some work with us this weekend down in the Gulf. It was absolutely amazing at what we saw. If I may focus back, first of all, to climate. Dr. Halter, are you off your rocker? Because there are some people in the Congress that are in total denial and say that people like you are nothing but an extremist when you talk about all the extremes that we're seeing right now. In fact, they've been around for a long time. What's your response to the way the Republicans are talking about climate change?
Yeah, well, good evening, Ed. You know, all I want to say is let's take a look at nature. Nature shows those that are looking and those that have trained for 30-plus years what's going down. Let's go back to 2010, Ed. In California, which, by the way, supplies $44.7 billion per annum of agriculture to our nation. We are the #1 producer. 50% of everything on your dinner plate comes from our state. Now, the honeybees produce 27.5 million pounds of honey in 2010. That honey winds up in your favorite cereals, in your bread, in your beverages, in your sauces. In 2013, 3 years into our deep drought, 10.9 million pounds of honey was produced, a 61% drop. 2014, the numbers aren't in. My friends tell me those numbers are lower. Look, the trees in these droughts and the plants aren't producing flowers. They're not producing flowers. The bees can't go in for their nectar, but worse. That means that our food supply is in jeopardy. I'll say it again. We've got to future-proof our nation now.
Tiernan, what's your response to the president's comments that the media and climate change just don't seem to mix very well, that we're ambulance chasing? I mean, that's paraphrasing. That's basically what the president says. If it bleeds, it leads. Well, I can tell you the Gulf is bleeding, and I'm going to tell that story next week. But the president's saying that climate change doesn't get the coverage it's deserved. What's your response to that?
I think historically climate change has not gotten the attention that it deserves, but I think actually, Ed, thanks to people like you, there is more and more appropriate attention to the incredible calamity of climate change. It's clearly happening more quickly and more severely than scientists had predicted, whether it's the algae bloom in Toledo, Ohio that prevented 500,000 people from drinking their own water, the droughts, the forest fires that you have talked about. So while there has not been enough attention to the problems, I think that we are seeing that start to change, and I hope that more and more people will follow your lead, because the thing that's encouraging is that there are so many solutions at our disposal, whether it's doubling down on energy efficiency, on clean renewable energy like wind and solar, on cutting carbon pollution, and yes, keeping the dirtiest fuels in the ground like tar sands oil in the ground for good.
Mike, the president says climate change coverage doesn't rate. What's your response to that?
Well, a large number of media outlets have made a potentially catastrophic climate change story into a snooze and snore moment for a couple of reasons. First, the American public is now officially reading and comprehending around a middle school level, so it makes it easy for Fox to come in with their 10-second sound bites and simply take the story and make it into a disaster. Second, Americans are experiencing this. They're not experiencing this Dust Bowl neighborhood like we see in Texas and California. They can't see oceans creeping up to their front door. They see winter storm chaos, and they don't understand that they're already experiencing climate change. They don't get that because at the same time they're seeing these worst storms take place, they're listening to Fox quality sophomoric comments about how snowstorms prove that there's no global warming. So it's difficult to explain the science behind that in a 10-second soundbite. Also, there's this overwhelming amount of corporate and billionaire money being pumped into think tanks, lobbying fraudulent AstroTurf groups to convince us not to worry, that it's all a big hoax. The ship really isn't sinking. Ignore all the water that's on the deck. And so it's complex, and you can't really blame the media entirely. It's a tough story to tell in 10 seconds. And when you have competitors like these think tanks and Fox News destroying the effort to tell the story, it becomes very difficult.
Well, the denial by elected officials is utterly amazing. Now, Reese, do you think that there's any doubt that climate change and severe weather patterns are connected?
Oh, there's no doubt, Ed. As a matter of fact, if we went down to Miami and you ask the mayor, they've got a very big problem. They're below sea level, and my colleagues 2 weeks ago at Harvard released a paper showing that sea level is actually rising 25% faster than we previously thought. Again, for every problem, there are at least 3 solutions. Now, we mortals on Main Street, that can translate into jobs, into future-proofing, and it's got to happen, Ed.
Tiernan, is the media, from the standpoint, would they, if they did a better job and focused more, and I think that's basically what the president was asking the media to do, that it would eliminate these deniers, that it would turn some heads, that maybe their attitude would be different?
Absolutely. Although there's been progress, clearly the media needs to focus a lot more on climate science, on asking members of Congress and people running for president, do they deny the basic science of climate change? Are they going to side with polluting industries, or are they going to stand up for future generations and really try to protect the planet? And I think, again, we have started to see some change, but more and more we need to see calling out of the more than 100 climate change deniers in Congress. That is simply outrageous. There was a little bit of progress with the amendment that Senator Schatz offered. There were actually 5 Republicans in the Senate who acknowledged that climate change is happening and that humans are significantly contributing to it. But that does beg the question, well, if you think it's happening, then what is the solution? What are the actions that we should take? Should we be cutting carbon pollution from coal-burning power plants? And absolutely the answer is yes, and it overwhelmingly is supported by the public.
Well, I think if the media did spend more time on it, that there would be some attitudes changing. And I think you can use BP as an example, Mike Papantonio. They've told a lot of people that things are okay in the Gulf. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, BP is spending millions of dollars a month to convince the rest of the country that there's no problem here. Look the other way. And they're using the science denial. It's destroyed the ecosystem down here on the coast. Anybody who's knowledgeable, who will face the facts, knows that. But the real ugly part of this story, Ed, is that there's not enough pressure on BP. Somebody has got to step on their neck and make sure that they do what they're supposed to do. When you were down here, when MSNBC was covering this story, all of a sudden people are saying they're grateful for the idea that the media is again paying attention to a story that is not going away. There are still dolphins coming up on the shore and just all types.
We will show you.
We'll
show you pictures of Cat Island that you won't believe. Remember Cat Island 5 years ago? You ought to see it today. It's all coming up next week. Dr. Reese Halter, Tiernan Settenfeld, and also Mike Papantonio. Great to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much.